my point was ever going to be embellished and going to be proven true, the world has gone Meshuggah.
Grab a bagel and a schmear, plus some Defo and Lubie. Welcome back to the Defo Show.
Certainly has gone Meshuggah. Welcome to the show. Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you, Jeff DeForest. We've got the professor in for one more shot. One more shot before the return of the great Mike Lubitz coming back from Spain here and should be arriving back in the United States today. Although, I don't know. I mean, is he a little nervous? Wasn't Lubie concerned that Shirley was born under the auspices of being a U.S. citizen by birth? So I would imagine it'll be very squeamish there as Lubie tries to clear customs there. And what's the guy's name? The hard-on for the ice people?
Human, something like that.
Homan. Yeah.
Homan.
Is it Homan?
I have no fucking idea.
He looks like he doesn't give a flying fuck about anybody, doesn't he? I mean, he just looks.
Is this a legitimate thing? Is there some question if Lubie can get back into the country or not?
I certainly hope.
I'm just saying we're gonna have to discuss the terms of the show if that's and I got his freaking dog. They better let Lubie back into the goddamn country.
We might have to move the post time back if you were going to.
He's got a goddamn husky. You would not buy. Everything in my house is covered in white fur. And I like the dog. He's a cool dog, but goddamn no. You gotta let Lubie and Shirley.
Perfect disposition for Lubie, this particular dog.
Oh yeah, they're exactly alike. You could tell it's Lubie's dog. It's got the same crazy eyes as Lubie.
Yes, exactly. All right, a lot of stuff on the table here, and they've officially kicked it off. Super Bowl coverage began yesterday with the media day. I don't know. I didn't see anything particularly eventful coming out of that.
Usually, I like the little pot shot Saquon took with Jameis Winston at the New York Giants. I thought that was kind of mildly entertaining.
I didn't catch that. What were the details?
Jameis Winston was going around for somebody doing media and asked Saquon Barkley, who should I sign with next year? And Saquon said, I heard the Giants need a quarterback. So I thought that was an entertaining little moment.
That was good. I didn't see anything that really stood out there. Usually there's some babe that creates a stir by running around.
Oh, I'm sure one of the Mexican channels had some, supermodel run. Like, I don't know what's going on with Mexican television, but like every sports girl is just, buries whoever you think the best looking babe in American sports television is. Mexico's got like 30 of them that absolutely bury American TV.
I'm very much in favor of the concept they use on all Spanish television, which is just find the hottest babes. It doesn't matter what they're saying. I mean, why would you want to look at Stephen A. Smith when you could be looking at some of these women that are featured in the novellas and all the other stuff on the Spanish TV? It would behoove me. I wish that was the one failing. I think, we were just talking about a little bit about life in general because I was reminiscing about my days running around following Leonard Hamilton and the Hurricane basketball team since Leonard announced that he was going to finally hang it up. He's hanging up the coach's book and
he's the oldest coach in the ACC, maybe the oldest in the country.
He's one of those guys that doesn't age at all physically.
Right.
He looks the same as he did in I want to say it was early 90s. When I was doing this, like 91, 92, maybe somewhere in there. Yeah, probably like 1992.
I got to say, I know not a Lubie favorite and a guy who's been a bit of a poke fun at on this show over the years. A really good career in college. I don't think people realize when he took Oklahoma State over, and yes, they had a lot of off-the-court issues with that, but he turned around a program that had been bad for a long time and really started them down the road of eventually going to the Final Four with big country Bryant Reeves. Then he came to Miami, which, obviously had some success with Rick Barry in like the 60s, and then had been, gone for almost 25 years.
Well, he followed Bill Foster, I think was the guy's name. And the team wasn't much. And when the team he inherited, he had probably the toughest luck that you could possibly have coming into a job because he had recruited a kid named Stephen Frazier who was averaging 30 points a game for like some school in Coney Island. So if you're averaging 30 in New York high school basketball in a competitive
Stevie Frazier was legit, and then he smoked his knee.
The very
over and over again.
Leonard decides to replicate and try and get this whole Kentucky culture going. Of course, he was a recruiter there for Rump and with these Kentucky teams.
Sutton,
And
not Rupp.
well, was it Rump? Who was it? Tubbs? Who
Sutton.
was it? Tubbs.
Eddie Sutton.
Oh, Sutton. Yeah, Sutton.
Yeah.
Eddie Sutton. And yeah, he doesn't go back that far. So he comes in and he recruits Stephen Frazier, and he also had Stephen Edwards, the brother of Douglas Edwards, who was a very good player out of Miami. And first night, he does the Midnight Madness, with the first eligible possible practice. So he gets these Miami players, and nobody gave a shit about Miami basketball at that time. They couldn't draw flies. They were playing at the Miami Arena, and it was just a sad state of affairs. They could have held these games in any local high school gym and drawn more people, probably, or at least it would have looked like a crowd. And Frazier blows out his knee the first night. Was never the same. I think he was in school. He did a little Blutarski number. He might have been at UM 6 years, but never ever resurrected any semblance of himself from the guy that you thought that you were getting. And
But then by the end, had Miami contending for the Big East with Tim James in that.
yeah, exactly.
I don't think they ever won a Big East title because UConn was really, really good in those days under Calhoun.
Oh, they were tremendous.
Then he goes to the pros, and his NBA run is largely a laughingstock. Like, people made fun of him for it because he goes to the Wizards basically to be Jordan's ball boy. And I, as I recall, really got paid for it. But then goes to Florida State and takes over a Florida State team that had been in a rut for probably a decade.
Right.
And honestly caught a terrible break with the COVID year because if you remember the year they canceled the tournament for COVID, Florida State was as good as anybody in the country. I mean, a lot of people were talking about them for a Final Four national title. So, I mean, again, not necessarily a guy who's going to go into the Hall of Fame as a coach or anything else.
Game day coaching, largely suspect.
A very solid career, turning around, 3 programs that had a lot of problems when he inherited them.
Oh, UM was buried. I remember being on the road. I only did UM basketball for a couple of seasons. So the first one with Leonard was abysmal. I don't think they won a Big East game.
Naturally, Lubie hates him for all of this. But
yeah, well, we had a funny incident with Lubie because we were doing the Final Four, which you had mentioned earlier in the week in Houston, which was the only time I've ever been to a Final Four. They decided to put together some kind of radio row, and oddly, we ended up being selected to be one of the stations that was given the freebie access to going out there and doing these broadcasts. And it turned out great. You're thinking, well, how good could this be? I mean, compared to NFL Super Bowl radio rows, where you have virtually everybody from every genre and every fashion of entertainment and sports celebrity. And it was amazing. I mean, because college basketball coaches retain everything about not only their program. It is a lot like talking to the aforementioned Rick Barry, where, as I've often alluded to, Barry sits down. He's a known sourpuss and antagonistic type of interview.
Yes.
If you say one thing that he doesn't agree with, he's likely to take the headset, fire it in your fucking face, and walk off and tell you, go fuck yourself on the air. And I think I was telling this story a couple of weeks ago, and for the Bleacher Brothers audience that's now catching us on YouTube and their YouTube channels, Barry was speaking at this luncheon that goes on annually that I was the MC of this past year, and he was there, and he was great, and he would have been riveted to what this guy had to say and thought he's the most fascinating guy on the planet. But the son of Earl Strom, I believe, what was in the audience at one year a few years back. And when he was introduced, I like to get up and just, give a little wave like he was in a boxing crowd. Hey, the former champ, the Bronx bomber, Joe Louis, and the guy waves. So Barry sees Strom, and he happened to be speaking at the time, and he says, you know what? Your fucking father cost me a championship. And he went off on this tirade on the poor guy's son. Years later, complaining about a fucking call in a game.
Well, your kids sucked, though, so, shut up.
What kind of maniac is that? Yeah, so, I mentioned this game that I saw him play with the Oakland Oaks at the East Comac Arena. Back then, the ABA was running double headers. And so in the first game, you had Rick Barry and the Oakland Oaks. I forget who they played. And in the second game, you had the Long Island Nets, who were playing out of this 3,000-seat piece of shit arena out in the middle of nowhere while they had Dr. J in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, okay, you know me, I'm going to try and figure
Yeah,
out
you
a
can see
way to
Dr.
sort of,
J. Yeah.
well, and I'm going to figure out a way to try and, get the guy to think, okay, well, at least I know a little bit about this guy or whatever. And so I mentioned this game, and I thought he had scored like 53 points. So yeah, this is as obscure a game as Rick Barry could have ever been in his lifetime. Right? It was very briefly in the ABA. That was only because he was a point man on the whole idea of collective bargaining and getting more favorable regulations and administration for the players in the league. So they kicked him out there for a while, and he plays in the ABA. He remembered every detail of this game. He corrects me on the number of points he scored. He said, I also had 19 assists and 14 rebounds. The score was this. It wasn't what you said. And I'm like, holy shit. But these college coaches, they remember every detail like that. And it was fascinating to speak to a variety of different college coaches. So I see Leonard Hamilton. And, of course, I knew Leonard because I had done any number of abysmal post-game losing coaches corner or whatever they called the thing. It was
Right.
like Heiner's corner after the game. And Leonard was very matter of fact, and there wasn't a whole lot to be happy about. How many times can you do the Tom Rinaldi Tiger Woods interview where
Right.
Tiger shoots an 81 coming back from another surgery and some
Right.
drug induced frenzy that he was in, and you say, well, what positives, Tiger, did you take away from that 81 today? So there wasn't much to say about. I mean, the Canes were getting clobbered in every game.
Right.
And so after the game, it's like, well, what did you think about so and so's defense? What's a guy going to say? And he was very, very just give me the facts, Jack Webb type of dragnet approach. And so I tell Lubie, I said, hey, Lubie, I know Leonard a little bit, and I was on the air, so I had to dispatch Lubie to see if Leonard would sit down and do an interview with us. So Lubie's like, I'm not talking to him. I don't want to talk to that guy. Not that Lubie would ever use his own personal bias, to reflect on the level of quality of guests you were getting on a show. So anyway, and I figured, okay, at the worst, I mean, Leonard's well past that 91, 92 or whatever it was time that he was coaching UM basketball and they were terrible. And as you said, he did actually bring the program to a reasonable, I mean, for where they were at as a possible championship contender. He didn't he take them to a grade 8 at one time or elite
I think
8?
it was the 16s, but
Something. Yeah, I mean, they got them into the tournament from where they were at. It was just pathetic. I mean, and I do remember a couple of times on road trips where when the athletic director is on a road trip and he doesn't often travel with the team, that's usually not good news for a losing coach.
right.
And so there were any number of those clandestine meetings in the dark corner of the bar or restaurant at the hotel with where Leonard would say, okay, I got to go talk to this guy and small D. And he couldn't have been any nicer of a guy. I mean, a very affable gentleman who was just a great guy to work with. But look, if he had to fire the guy, that would have been the time. So he survived any number of those. Anyway, Lubie almost refuses to go over and bring him to the show. And then Leonard sits down and he goes, Defo, holy shit. like he was my best buddy, which I don't know. We weren't close or anything. I
Right.
mean to even suggest that because, it was sort of a cordial business type relationship that you would have with any coach who wasn't necessarily one of those guys that's going to put his arm around you and go, hey, Deef, let's go have a beer. And sure enough, he sat down and he couldn't have been any more charming. And we've had him on subsequent interviews where he came on a couple of times. I think courtesy of the lovely and talented Leslie Visser invited him on the show one time. And he couldn't have been any more interesting or intriguing of a guy to talk to. He was absolutely great. And so Lubie loved him ever since then, which is kind of wild, although he still despises his coaching at Florida State in most games.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to understand Lubie to understand the
We're asking the audience to do a lot to understand
background of that story because Lubie will talk to anybody who has ever done anything to make them remotely known or famous. Like in the early days of Defo Radio, which most of you like, we were doing the streaming thing really early on.
We were ahead of our time, unfortunately.
And Lubie had gotten some connection at NBC, and they were feeding us guests. And they were all like, at best, mildly known people, but some of them were, and they were all just awful, like just the worst interviews.
Yes.
We were getting Donovan McNabb like every other week, and it was the most boring segment to the point where I would like sit and threaten to hang up on Donovan McNabb
That's
just
it.
because it was so boring and awful. And
That's surprising. You would figure that this guy would be a talker, no?
like at some point we got oh god, the kid who played Dawson, James Vanderbeek, who played Dawson. I'm like, why the fuck are we interviewing Dawson? He's like, he's on TV.
He's a big star.
He's a famous actor. Why am I
You
with
don't
him?
know. You don't know.
I was like, okay, we'll do it, but I'm gonna call him Dawson the whole interview and just wait to see how much I can antagonize this kid before
Yeah.
he hangs up.
That's always bad when you're dying for the guy to hang up or trying to provoke him to just.
Yeah, like Lubie
interview.
will anything. So to hear that he's refusing to talk to Leonard Hamilton is pretty funny.
No, it's pretty wild. Yeah, he didn't want to talk to him. He didn't want to bring him on there, and we had like any number of wildly entertaining guys on. Who was the guy that was at Florida Gulf Coast at the time? Went to USC.
Oh God, Tim
he-
something.
Yeah, he was great. A couple of other guys really impressed me, even from schools that were not necessarily having the greatest success, but it was quite a convention. And it was also the place where we established on that particular trip, which I think was the highlight of the trip. George on the chat line is asking what was my favorite moment in radio. I don't know that was it, but when we confirmed through Lubie that Bill Self was wearing a hairpiece, like years of speculation, and it still would fool me today if I hadn't seen the guy from the back there. But no, that was a wild convention. If you're a basketball fan and you're just like hanging out, and these guys are the basketball coaches are far more loose and likely to actually just have a conversation with a regular guy who's a fan than any of the football coaches would be. I don't know why that is. Is there less pressure on these guys? It doesn't seem that way.
I have one that's getting discussed a lot online. And you guys skipped Twitter last year. I mean, skipped Vegas last year, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I was
So
set
in
to
terms
go,
of
and then, they were going to
Super
act up.
Bowls
Oh.
and wandering down Defo memory lane.
Yeah.
Memory lane. What was your favorite city other than maybe down here to do the Super Bowl at? What was the location you enjoyed the most? Whether it's the best radio row or the best city or whatever.
Good question. I might say New Orleans.
Makes sense.
Yeah, possibly.
I know you're a huge fan of the food and the jazz.
I love the food. I like the atmosphere. I like the people a lot. When you're talking about the service industry and involved with the mailman and his Let's Eat South Florida, you see a lot of aggravated people are constantly complaining no matter what the hell the deal is. And it seems like it's an overwhelming majority of the posts are about, well, you know what? The waiter was a real snotball and he didn't have time for us. And I talked to the man, it's a lot of ugliness. And yet I don't experience that. I've certainly been to places. You're a restaurant owner, Professor, so could be that somebody catches an employee that just, got divorced or whatever and is having a particularly bad day. And it shouldn't be reflected in their work at the restaurant, but everybody's human. So you might have an occasional bad experience, but New Orleans, they couldn't be any more welcoming. Yeah, you've been there many times, have you not?
I wouldn't say many, but I've been there a few. Yeah.
I mean, the people there, everywhere you go. I like a place where you can walk into a bar with a drink in hand, and they say, "Hey, come on in."
That is one of the unique aspects of the city of New Orleans is the
just listen to the band, right?
Public alcohol consumption.
That's a big part of it. Well, Vegas would have been a favorite, of course. A lot of it. New York was probably the worst setup that I've seen.
Okay.
Absolutely the worst. And then the game turned out to be a disaster from the standpoint.
Yes, you had the Seahawks.
Well, and the elements, of course, were not favorable. Even though it wasn't overwhelming, it was just enough to fuck everything up. So the fact that the stadium was in New Jersey, they had the radio row set up, the headquarters there were, in the heart of Manhattan. It was very difficult to get to for us staying out on Long Island early in the morning. And it was a mess. It really was. Phoenix, I said, earlier in the week, we were talking about Phoenix, overrated as a destination for anything, I think. I don't know how you feel about Phoenix. I do remember.
And the only benefit of Phoenix is that it's a half-hour flight from Vegas. I assumed for years when they would send it to Phoenix over and over again that it was only because at the time that Vegas didn't have a franchise. That they only sent it there because of the half-hour flight to Vegas. Because you could go, you could wrap up Radio Row at 6:00, get on a plane, be in Vegas by like 7:30, and then be back by midnight or 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah, I never did do that. I was out in Phoenix several times. I called some fights in Phoenix also, and the one time I went, it was after a Super Bowl. As I was saying earlier in the week, the Mustang and I drove to Vegas after that for a few days.
It's a long drive, but it's a short flight.
It was a schlep. Yeah, it was longer.
Because you got to go like around the mountains and whatnot. It's a weird geographical thing where it's like a 30-minute flight, but it's like a 5-hour drive.
Right, and all of a sudden you're saying to yourself, "Hey, fuck! Look at that, the Hoover Dam."
Yeah.
Are you compelled to stop if you're driving? I just prefer
Hoover Dam
right through all of that. Yeah, Hoover Dam.
I think most people are. I am definitely in the not category. I kind of like the first time I went with PC, which was the Defo trip.
Yeah,
like, PC was desperate to go see like this mining ghost town, like 30 or 45 minutes at a time. Where
unless you're finding gold there that you can bet.
Well, the one of the big things was who was Clark Gable mentor? Was it Carol Lombard or whatever? Like, and her plane went. It was in this town where her plane went down while she was sending war bonds,
and her gold teeth scattered all over.
Yeah, it was one of the.
I don't think any of the ancillary things, except maybe the Grand Canyon, but that's like a separate trip if you really want to do it right. Any of the ancillary things in Las Vegas, Red Rock Canyon, any of this other stuff.
I don't mind the shows. There's a couple of shows.
Shows, yeah, but I'm talking about like going outside to some natural, thing of beauty or whatever that you have to experience. Lake Havasu or whatever that is. Just forget about it. I don't want to know anything about it. Just leave me on the strip and I'll be fine.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Are there any really bad ones? Indianapolis is not like a place that you really want to go.
I have heard people complain a lot about
Minnesota. Certainly, it was a nice city for what it was, but unless you're on a dog sled, who the fuck wants to be in Minnesota?
I don't want to be in any of these cold. Like any place where it has to be a dome because of the weather. I don't want anything to do with it.
No, it's unfortunate when we know how these things are awarded. When you capitulate to Roger Goodell, which that was always one of my favorite events to attend. There were two events that I always wanted to visit when I went to these Radio Row coverages of the Super Bowl. One was the Roger Goodell State of the Union address.
Okay.
Because it was just, it was almost like, and this new Trump press secretary, she's a beauty, huh? I mean, she makes Huckabee Sanders look like, she was Harvey Green when he was with the Dolphins in terms of the way
she reminds me of when we invaded Iraq. Do you remember the Iraqi guy that would come on and be like, "Oh, we're slaughtering the Americans in the streets"?
She's great.
It's like the chick version of him.
Yeah. So Goodell, I mean, you're getting nothing but bullshit from Roger Goodell.
Right.
So I always love that. And then I loved when they interviewed, depending on who it was, but with rare exception, I always enjoyed seeing the absolute stroke job that was given by the media to whoever was doing the national anthem or the halftime show. I guess it was the halftime show.
I think that's still the case.
Yeah, because Beyonce, I mean...
were you there when the...
we went to the Beyonce press conference, and I thought that Kevin Frazier of Entertainment Tonight, who used to be on SportsCenter, right?
Yeah.
And, nice, lucrative transition into an easy kick, just cake job, where all you have to do is any kind of a blowjob interview to any of these superstars, and they love you for it. On top of that, it's almost like somebody praising the Trumpster. And the big issue at the time, which, you're going to get a little bit... You don't get a lot of attack journalism in general in sports, but every now and then, something comes up and people are firing questions. So the big issue was, did Beyonce lip sync the national anthem at some previous event? I don't know if you remember that.
I do not remember that at all, but
huge controversy floating around. And so Kevin Frazier, literally, as I think he was having an orgasm, floats and sugarcoats the question. "Oh, Beyonce, you're so great. It's so good to have you here. I can't imagine that anybody would accuse you of such a dastardly Milli Vanilli-like thing as lip-syncing the national anthem. What is your response?" And she's like, "Oh, Kevin, thank you for that question." It's like there was so much suction in the room there that anybody that had a hairpiece had to be concerned that it was just going to come right off their fucking head. It was amazing. Those were some of the early activities of Super Bowls that I really enjoyed. Getting back to Leonard, though, I mean, you're right. You would have to say what now? Now, is he in any of these? Because how many basketball halls of fame are there? There's one that's just like the Basketball Hall of Fame,
Right, which
and
is
that includes like colleges and pros, does it not?
includes everything, and
TV.
international and women's too.
Okay.
And I believe there's a college basketball Hall of Fame as well. Again, I don't know that Leonard
Is there
Hamilton's
no
getting
NBA specific NBA Hall of Fame?
No, there's no specific NBA. There's the big
How is
one,
that
which you
possible?
hear announced as the Hall of Fame, is
Yeah.
the International Basketball Hall of Fame. And
How
now
is it
they're
that
doing
the
women too.
NBA has not
I guess
capital
they've always done women, but the selections on the women used to be few and far between, and now there's pretty much one per class.
overwhelming? Yeah, you're always going to have. I mean that will go on.
Right,
If
and, like, for
if-
years, it was, like, Nancy Lieberman Klein and Cheryl Miller, and that's all they had, and
that was
then,
it.
like, in the last 10 or 15 years, it's pretty much one per class.
I think Angel Reese was just
She'll probably make it eventually, yes. Or
inducted.
worse shoot, so they can put up the how not to shoot clips with,
Yeah.
Angel Reese.
No, it was a wild time following Leonard Hamilton around. Short, I mean, those 2 years still stand out. I tried to hit.
I gotta say, and I'm not trying to be negative about the guy, the Kentucky scandal that he was just dead in the center of, that he managed to bounce back from that and go
Ever
on
happened
to
to
have
Sure.
a long and pretty great career in college basketball. When again, the famous book about all this was a book called Raw Recruits, which came out probably in like 88, 89, somewhere around there. And if you read it, you would think that Leonard Hamilton was just like a mafia bag man. All the things that were going on at the University of Kentucky. And the book more or less put it all on Leonard Hamilton's plate.
Right.
You would have thought he was 100% like gonna go into, I don't know, selling vinyl siding or something. Like, there's no way this guy is ever going to coach again. But managed to, bounce back from that and go on to a great career.
Wow, lengthy too. I mean, maybe he had some kind of epiphany because he certainly didn't come off when he was a UM coach as any kind of unscrupulous bastard that probably would be placed beneath a personal injury attorney of the worst variety and total lack of ethics. Came off as like a religious guy. So teams, as I recall, I mean, the players were fair. There weren't a lot of incidents, and this was at a time at the University of Miami where players were, on the football team were throwing track stars off of the roofs of buildings. It was wild times, and Leonard's teams, as I recall, comported themselves very well. You didn't have like anybody getting in fist fights at the airport or not a lot of screaming back and forth. Very quiet though, and humbled, no doubt, by the fact that they were losing virtually every game. So, congratulations to Leonard Hamilton on a great career, and we'll have to try and get him on one of these shows in the future because he's actually fascinating to talk to, as Lubie discovered when he finally relented and capitulated. And I said, hey, just go talk to him, Lubie, huh? Imagine, I mean, you know how it is with Lubie. You got to listen to the half-hour lecture about why you hate to test the guy before he actually makes a move. You're like, just go over. He's right there. He's getting a cup of coffee. I'm sure he'll come on the show. All right, the Super Bowl. Well, we'll get into that a little bit here. As I know you said this, Professor, that you're not inclined when they run. And I keep seeing this article pop up on CBSSports.com. Which is my usual quick source for now that I'm not getting my New York Post, even more so. Quick source for what the hell happened last night. The Post was unlikely to give you that kind of a picture, but they gave you more perspective on certain things that were happening. And I don't know. I mean, there seems to always be if you're reading about New York teams for some reason, you find out about like a lot of other stuff that you otherwise wouldn't be aware of. So that was one of the reasons I enjoyed getting it. But now I'm just looking at this thing, and they keep running by. Like they have a surefire way to hit a parlay that's going to pay off at 25-1. Are you
Okay.
buying? Are you buying that for a second?
Well, I'd have to hear the details, but
this is the computer, model. They don't reveal the details unless you ante up like
it's hidden
subscription.
behind the paywall.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
I
I'm
mean,
not
it's like
being
Stu
biased.
Feiner coming on and telling you that he's never lost a Super Bowl in the life.
Anything that's behind a paywall is usually just a giant mound of bullshit.
Imagine, I mean, what kind of crap you're being fed after you go ahead and ante this up. They have to figure that you're the biggest sucker in the universe. As soon as you type in that last number and whatever that is, that little 3-digit
Got
number code on your credit card, you're dead. And then you find out that this is the most far-fetched parlay that you could ever possibly wager on. But I don't know. Have you zeroed in on anything specific yet?
I looked at the numbers a lot this weekend, and it kind of changed my mind, to be honest. Because initially, my initial read was, you're not gonna,
Can't beat Mahomes.
yeah, you're not gonna profit going against the Kansas City Chiefs. But you look at the numbers of these two teams in the season,
Yes.
and it kind of overwhelmingly points to a Philadelphia victory here, if we're being honest. Basically, to me, if you're betting the Kansas City Chiefs, you are betting based on a thought that the Chiefs are basically the Shaq Kobe Lakers, that they are a team who can just sort of cruise, not just through a season, but through a game at kind of half speed and turn it on right at the end, which again, they've got one loss on the year. They have managed to do this over and over again. But I mean, by the numbers, this looks like a Philadelphia win. And it's overwhelming to a degree that I kind of can't ignore it, to be honest.
You're getting points with the team that you think is a better team. That's usually a favor. I mean, you're almost compelled to make that move.
Yeah, again,
That's
my hesitation on this, and again, it's funny because the guy is an NFL legend, and it's Vic Fangio, and
Yes.
he's so intractable about the way he wants to play defense, and I have my doubts that it's going to work against the Chiefs. Again, unless he goes totally off script, which
How could he
if you're a
not? At
Dolphins
some
fan,
point, though, I
and
mean, as old school and as set in his ways as he might be, at some point, don't you put something in? I mean,
you would think, but then you go
in
back.
any game plan that I mean, look, you're going against a guy that can, as you've been alluding to, if they don't get this pressure on him, which they are only going to rush their 4 guys conventionally, although it's likely that those guys are better than the Chiefs' offensive line.
Yeah, but I mean that defense line's been better than pretty much everybody.
But Mahomes, he has to be aware that Mahomes just absolutely dissects this type of defense.
I mean, you'd think so, but you go back and watch the replay of that Dolphins Chiefs playoff game last year, which Fangio was obviously involved in as Miami's DC. And it was such a situation between the weather, between the fact that Tua wasn't fully healthy, between the fact that, everything going on, you're on the road in Kansas City. Your defense needs to create some plays. And I don't mean needs to make stops, because they did make stops, but they need to, make a turnover, do something to swing this game. And again, go back and watch that game, and Miami's in base 80% of the time. He absolutely didn't. We're gonna play bend don't break. We're gonna, It seems like just philosophically this is who he is, and he may not be capable of changing it.
Possible, yeah. I mean, how old is he now? He's in his early 70s. I can relate.
I want to say mid 70s. So yeah.
Although when you looked at Philadelphia's defense, they were as good as they possibly could be throughout most of the year.
100%.
And especially, I mean, it's not like you can't score on them, but yeah, I mean that's an extremely interesting dynamic that you've pointed out and focused in on there, Professor, because everybody's blowing Vic Fangio as being largely responsible.
Look, he's a great coach.
Yeah.
Again, I just don't know that because you're dealing with Patrick Mahomes, who, whatever, I'm not wanting to do the greatest quarterback of all time nonsense, which seems to be one of the hot topics this week. He's a unique talent, and again, you look at his receiving core, and it's not necessarily the greatest dudes in the world, but it's a lot of guys with a lot of experience who know where to find the soft spots in zones.
Yes,
and again, that's what Philly
make
does.
good moves after the catch.
Well, and again, Patrick Mahomes has. I don't want to say he's become like Tom Brady because Tom Brady, of course, was famous for the check down throws to the running back. The most exceptional throw Tom Brady had in his bag was the check down. He was probably the great. No, I'm for once I'm not saying this is an insult. Like Tom Brady probably threw the check down to the running back better than any quarterback has ever thrown it, at least on a consistent basis. But Mahomes has gone from a guy who, again, 3 years ago when Cincinnati beat them, it was because Cincinnati played too high. They played deep, and they said, we're not letting you throw the ball over the top. We dare you to go on these long drives and beat us. And Mahomes just couldn't do it. He'd get impatient over and over and over again. Over the next 3 years, he has transformed himself to a guy who is the perfectly patient quarterback, to a guy.
It looks like Drew Brees all of a sudden.
Not in terms of the scrambling around, but to a guy who in a lot of ways is kind of a boring quarterback in the way, he handles it so efficiently to the point where like now this is what Kansas City does. They kill you 8 to 12 yards at a time instead of, the early days with Tyreek where it looked like, the comeback of the 60s and 70s Raiders with, Kenny Stabler throwing the ball over the top to Cliff Branch. They've gone from that to this really efficient style of passing game that is very tough to zone up against.
Yeah, that physicality, I think, when you look at and we've been waiting to see Kansas City be defeated by somebody. You always want to see maybe some new blood infused into the equation when it comes to championships. Unless of course you happen to be a big fan of that club. I was thinking, and look, everybody thought Baltimore this year they had the dynamic to do it with Derrick Henry in there, and of course Lamar Jackson again was everybody's MVP until he got to the. I don't know that he was so much to blame. I don't think you can really. I know he had a pick in that ball game. They lost to Buffalo and a fumble, but at the same time, they were very much in a position to win the game at the end there as he executed that late drive. And you can't account for the fact that a guy dropped the 2-point conversion and essentially cost them the ball game. So he had atoned for himself, but still everybody's waiting for somebody to knock off the Chiefs. Nobody did, but I think they're facing. And your point might be the most valid of anything that I've heard in all of the babbling. Is that can Fangio deviate at all from what he's been doing? And if he can't, then you're absolutely counting on the rushers up front to get to Mahomes at some point.
Well,
otherwise, you're dead meat.
And you're counting on, which Philadelphia's been very good at this year, being able to hold up in the red zone.
Yeah.
Which, again, in a normal matchup is a really smart way to play NFL football these days. It's the way a lot of teams are attacking defenses these days. But against Kansas City, like, I look, again, I don't like the greatest of all time conversations, but I will say if he's not by himself, Andy Reid is at least as good a play caller in the red zone as anybody ever has been.
Yeah.
Yes, they do some gimmicky stuff, but it all works. So you can't, bitch about the gimmicky stuff that they do.
Holmes throwing a sky hook pass that
right.
just
again,
find a guy in the
a lot of it is the ability to improvise by Mahomes, which again, he's as good as anybody has ever been. Throwing from weird arm angles, doing off what do they call it? Off spot stuff.
Yeah.
Or off script stuff. And that's part of it. But again, Reid is also as good a red zone play caller as anybody has ever been.
Has a good handle on
what works and what doesn't.
For sure.
So again, I don't know how successful you can be playing bend don't break against the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's funny they wanted to run Sirianni out of town not that long ago. Even during the course of the season, which was pretty.
I don't blame them. He's not quite on the Dan Campbell level with these batshit insane decisions.
Right.
He's not far behind him.
The poor man's Dan Campbell, I guess.
But
he's like an avant-garde Dan Campbell.
Well, he took over a very good team where Campbell took over a train wreck and
Yes.
has turned it around, and you get a lot less credit if you take over a good team. We'll see. I mean, honestly, I think this is a great matchup. I think,
Good matchup. Yeah.
again, Detroit Lions fans will object, but I will make the argument that these have been the two best teams throughout the course of the season. I get that it's a rematch and people don't necessarily like the rematch. I get that people are suffering from Chiefs exhaustion at this point, because it's not just the going 3 in a row. It's the, what have they've played in 5 of the last 6, and it feels like it's even longer than that at this point.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they're making the Packers dynasty look like it was,
yeah. So I get why people are down on it, but I'm not. I think it's a really appropriate final game of the season
Yes.
between the two most deserving teams.
And
And I think there's a
outcome,
lot of interesting stories and a lot of and a very interesting matchup. But I'm going to blame you if the Chiefs win, because you kind of swung me. The more you look at it off your initial read, the more, you kind of got to point at the Eagles here in this.
how do you not take a shot with them? I always look at the 2 out of 3 things can happen. 2 of them are bad or whatever. That's a cliche.
Yeah.
But in this case, 2 out of 3 things can happen, and 2 of them are good.
Yeah.
Where the Eagles can win the game outright, that is far from preposterous. I mean, you're not going to be Baker acted if you are running around town going, "Yeah, Eagles got this one." You're getting a 1.5, so they could even lose the game by the slimmest of margins, and you'll still collect your bet. And the third thing is the Chiefs knocked the shit out of them, and you look like a fool, but we're accustomed to that. All right, a couple of things, and then we're going to come back in a moment here and go to the wire here at 9 o'clock. But NBA last night, I see this score pops up right away. OKC 125, Milwaukee 96, and your first impression is, all right, Giannis must not have played, right? So I look at the box score. They didn't have Giannis, Lillard, Brook Lopez, or Middleton, the Milwaukee Bucks last night.
Things shaping up well in Milwaukee.
So, yeah, you were getting 18 with Milwaukee, and it wasn't enough. That was kind of wild. Is Kevin Durant really going to be traded? That's the other thing. What are the Phoenix Suns doing? I mean, they're supposedly actively pursuing, or somewhat actively, maybe, it's all clandestine stuff, but they are supposedly looking at Jimmy Butler, and he only wants to go to that team. But then they're going to get rid of Durant. I mean, what is it? What sense does any of this make? Unless they can unload Bradley Beal. So
should we be looking for anything that makes sense out of Phoenix's new owner?
This guy's a nutbag, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean,
haven't we just come to the conclusion that he's batshit insane?
Who is this guy? Because he's certifiably crazy.
Right.
Some of the stuff that he does, you're looking at it going, my God. I mean, how the guy with the Carolina Panthers, he's like a known asshole too, right? That is always firing coaches, like 1 year,
the hedge fund guy, yeah.
Yeah, he's fucking nuts. But this guy at Phoenix,
did he get into it with a fan like last year?
Yeah, he's a classic.
Yeah.
Guy. He makes James Dolan look like he's Mickey Arison.
Well, I'm honestly, given Elon and what's going on, and shouldn't we just expect this to be like the next 4 years? We're like just
maybe the next 20
billionaires, excuse me, are just going to get increasingly wackier as we go along. And
what is it about that?
Get into these schemes. I think we should. Did you read that article I sent you the other yesterday on the Luka trade and the Adelson family? Because
I didn't get a chance to read that yet.
That was one of the more interesting theories I've seen floated.
Yeah, I caught pieces of it, but I didn't get to read the full thing yet. So I'll get on that today. All right, we're going to come back with more. The Panthers are red hot, and they are in action tonight. They're at Washington. Washington having a great year. I never thought this was one of those records that you would have figured. Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record didn't seem possible. I would imagine Shula's record for victories as an NFL coach, with Belichick now resigned, at least for the near future, to be a college coach.
How far away is Andy Reid? Because it's starting to look like Andy Reid's going to coach forever.
That could be. I don't think that he's that close, although he should be, right? Because he's been racking up double-digit wins for the last, 10 years? And was a winner in Philadelphia before.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
I'll have to check that out. Number of wins by Andy Reid. Cy Young, 511 victories. That's never happening. I mean, there's no chance of that. The Bonds record, will that stand forever if you can count Barry Bonds as the all-time home run
Probably.
leader? Possibly
I
so.
mean, I'd forever. No, I'll say no on forever, but
The guy would have to average 40 home runs a year for like 19 years.
I don't think we'll be alive to see it. Let's put it that way.
Imagine that. That's so many home runs as Fakak, the guy hit with the Victor Conti juice. Just
Right.
amazing. After he was like when he was playing for Jimmy Leland there in Pittsburgh.
I mean, he was still like a 30 home run guy before that. It wasn't like he couldn't swing the bat before that.
Plus, he was hitting like 90 home runs a season, and he only saw 90 pitches that were anywhere in the same area code as the plate.
That's the same. That's the real crazy part about the
amazing.
Bonds
Yeah, I mean, he had to literally do one of those. Did you ever do one of those tomahawk jobs? Pitch was high, and you're already committed to swing, so you're swinging like this, and you're thinking, "What the fuck am I doing?" Bonds hit those out of the park. It was fantastic. All right, we're going to come back with more. So, yeah, the Panthers in action tonight against Washington, and the Cats have taken over the top point total in the East with a 3-game winning streak, 7-3 in their last 10. And in the East, I guess overall, I believe they're in like third place. Yeah, they've taken over their division lead. And how many divisions are there in hockey? 4?
I have no. I don't pay attention to Canadian soccer.
Are we still going to have? I mean, what's Trump going to do? Is he going to ban any?
One thing I approve of with all of this is let's just hammer Canada.
We're coming back with more in a moment. Now that
the time,
it's 8:48.
Hey folks, Tony Segreto here. Let me ask you a question. What do you look for when you go out to eat? Good food, obviously, friendly atmosphere, not too loud, but good energy, reasonable prices, and a place where you feel comfortable. All those ingredients, no pun meant there, are hard to find unless you're talking about the Texas Roadhouse. You see, they encompass all of those attributes. Really, really good food, amazing atmosphere, good for a family, good for a date, or just a night out for yourself, and prices that will make you extremely happy. Their ribs unmatched. Steaks hand-cut every day. Everything, and I mean everything, is made on site, including their incredible bread. It's the one day, folks, that you can forget about low-carb diets. Trust me when I tell you, Texas Roadhouse, your restaurant, your destination when you say, where should we go and eat tonight?
From the newly renovated sports bar to the beautiful bayside views captured at the Tiki Bar, Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill has it all. Located at mile marker 104, the Big Chill also offers waterfront dining while experiencing breathtaking sunset views of the Florida Keys. It's simply the hottest spot in the Keys to cool off. That's Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill at mile marker 104 in Key Largo. For more information, call today at 305-453-9066.
Recently, we realized it's not just hurricane season that can hurt us. Any time of year, things can happen to your home or business. And the insurance company can be your friend, but they also can be your enemy. Horizon Public Adjusters, Justina Testa, are here for you to help this process go so much easier. Before you call the insurance company, call Horizon Public Adjusters and Justina Testa at 954-809-8752. Would you go into court without an attorney? So why would you go up against an insurance company without Horizon Public Adjusters and Justina Testa? 7 to 10 times more money recovered with a public adjuster than if you went on your own. If there's no recovery, there's no fee. Give them a call at 954-809-8752. Why go up against insurance companies alone when you can have Horizon Public Adjusters?
I don't know why I'm wondering. Is Justina Testa still in that business?
No.
I'm assuming so. No? She's renting yachts now? Why would you go into court without an attorney? I love the way Lubie put that. Anyway, welcome back to the show. Okay, so we're in deep stretch here. A bunch of things to cover. And we've had some excellent participation on the chat line. 301 victories for Andy Reid, according to Brian. So that's doable. I mean, he would have to be around 4 or 5 more years. What's the number? Is it 347? How many is Shula's?
I believe it. I don't know. On including playoff wins, I do not know actually.
Okay, all right. I don't know why that number pops into my head. 347, I want to say.
Okay,
that might have been Stan Musial's batting average in 1963. But no, I think that might be the number. If it is, then you're talking about the guy would have to have 10 win seasons in what will now be a 17-game season, so 10-7, not overwhelming
And as
expectations.
long as Mahomes is there, I think you can figure on an average of
Yeah.
like 12.
Okay, so he could do this in 4 years.
Yeah.
If that's the number. I'm not sure. Maybe. Okay. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that Gretzky's record, and it looks like Ovechkin's going to surpass him, because I think they'll just bring him back until he does, no?
It seems like it, yes.
It's like Ovechkin. He's older than Gump Worsley was when he retired, and he's still firing that slap shot from the left side. Yeah, I don't know. Reed might be a possibility there. 328 issue. Oh, well, then he blows by him like he was standing still. No,
That's just regular season wins. And,
that's just regular season.
and I think Reed's number for regular season is like 275 or something like
Oh, okay. All right. So we're talking about all-time wins. And yeah, I wouldn't separate that in the regular season. You would have to include playoffs as well. 347. There you go.
that. Okay.
So yeah, it could be done. Andy says, "What was Rich Kotite's total?" I think that was 3.
Yeah.
If that was that for 2 seasons. I don't know.
I mean, his quarterback was Bubby Brister. Come on.
Yes. You would have to say that that was a bit of a compromise if you were going to establish yourself as a guy that was actually head coaching material. All right, Professor. So we're going to see you on Friday. You're going to construct your best prop bets. Have you done any kind of peripheral?
I
view
have.
of this,
I got
so far?
one. I will not list it right here, but we got one that is. It seems like every couple of years, like a really stupid bet becomes really popular, and that's definitely the case this year. So you will see that Friday.
All right, if you were going to define yourself as a person or some kind of type, could that be determined if by the answer to this question? Given a choice of a free pass to Augusta National for the final round of the Masters,
Mm-hmm.
or to be on 16 at the Waste Management Tournament in Phoenix for the opening round, where would you rather be?
16, the stupid one with the
Yeah,
stadium.
that's where they start firing shit. And
I can't believe this because I'm like the rare sports guy who has really no interest in this, but I'm choosing Augusta. Like that, the Phoenix Open just seems like a dumpster fire. Like, can you imagine all these people
into a mosh pit?
Can you imagine all these people freaking the fuck out all day long about a par 3? Like, I mean, and it's not even. It's not like Sawgrass where it's an island hole, or it's just kind of a regular old par 3.
Exactly.
On any TPC course you can find in America that they happen to build these stands around.
You're having a horrible round yourself.
Fucking mind.
Yeah.
No, I've never been to the Phoenix Open. I don't really care about the Phoenix Open. I know people, like particularly young golf fans, get excited about it.
You have to throw the sponsor in, Waste Management. I mean,
it just seems to me like a bunch of fucking drunks watching. Right? Like, how else, other than with liquor, I guess cocaine, can you just fuel your energy to scream your head off all day?
Mescaline, I guess. You go out to the desert.
Bunch of jerk off golfers firing at a par 3. Like,
they sell peyote buttons at the concession stands there on 16. It's incredible.
Like, honestly, if you could get that excited about anything Scotty Scheffler has ever done in his life,
you're still down on the Scheffler, man. He made a good account of himself.
Boring, and he's such a chalk eating pig. How am I not going to hate this guy? Like, I honestly have not done the historical research, but I'm going to at some point look this up. Because I was not interested in golf and particularly golf betting during these days.
Yeah.
Like, was Tiger going off at these low odds when Tiger was in the middle of his run? Because my recollection, and it was sort of more at the tail end.
No?
It was more at the tail end, is that like Tiger was usually like 5 to 6 to 1. And this guy's going off at 350.
Oh, it's crazy.
And he's so fucking, he's so dull. Like, I would rather.
He won 9 tournaments last year.
I'm not saying he's not a great player. Like, he is a great player. It's just that he's so boring. Like,
without a doubt, he fits the mold. When you go out and cover golf tournaments, and I remember specifically thinking this at Doral, as I saw another guy with like a perfectly pressed golf shirt. Well, whoever had one of those?
He's a robot that the PGA created.
Yeah, and the beige or tan slacks, and just looked like in Tinkum. I mean,
Yeah, he's Don
looked like
Johnson.
Don Johnson.
Yeah, he's a dork. Like-
And you're thinking, what the fuck is that? I mean, and it's all of them, every single guy, except for a couple of guys that I liked, like where you had like Andy Bean walking around, and the one half of his shirt, the front of his shirt was out of his pants, and because they didn't fit him that well.
Like you go back through a whole generation, and like at least some of those, like Greg Norman, he always choked, and all these guys had like one little glitch that made them interesting, and Scheffler has none of that.
Nothing. No.
Just so boring.
His press conferences make Belichick look like he was Martin Luther King.
I mean, before him, Rahm was the guy who was the chalk eater at every tournament. At least you had the fluctuating weight to keep Fatso McSpanus
yes,
a little bit interesting.
And there was always that debate about, I mean, what sport are your favorite fat athletes? And then, of course, golf would be mine with Kiridesh Happy Barnred, which, was a legendary. The guy weighed like 400 pounds. He looked like a sumo wrestler.
I know a lot of people love the guy. Supposedly Scheffler. Supposedly he's a good dude.
He seems like a decent guy.
I just find him so.
He has no luck though. He gets treated like Tyreek Hill rolling into the Masters. He's leading the tournament, for God's sake. What was that? The U.S. Open? I don't know. Which what was that at Augusta National?
No, it was in Louisville. I want to say it was
okay.
PGA, and it was Valhalla.
Probably his hometown. And and then he cuts himself. He's cutting up some salami or something to make a sandwich, and he's using a wine glass.
My secret hope is that Scotty Scheffler is actually like a cartel lord, and all these weird things keep happening because of his alternate lifestyle, and the PGA is just covering it up. Like he actually got arrested in Louisville because the drug dog tipped on his car, and he had 47 kilos of cocaine in the back of his rental car, and the PGA and his lawyers just covered that up.
Be as likely, and believable as that Luka Doncic got traded, which no one can still figure this out, Professor. 2 days later.
Again, the story I sent you yesterday is an interesting twist.
Yeah.
On it,
what was the gist of it for the
long and short version of it is that the Adelsons have been trying to get a gambling bill passed in Texas for like 4 years now, and they get to the legislature and they lose badly. When they bought the team, they actually very publicly said they're not that interested in basketball, that among their assets, the NBA team's not that important to them. But what they want to do is build another Venetian mega complex in Dallas and include the arena, make the arena part of that complex, sort of like the Sphere is now part of the Venetian complex in Las Vegas. They're not talking about building a Sphere. They're talking about building and that, the carrot was they'll own the team, blah, blah, blah. It'll be a first-class NBA arena. I guess the Dallas arena is kind of dated at this point. And then Texas, the Texas legislature shot it down again last year. So the theory is that this is the stick, is you're either going to give us our casino or we're going to tank the Mavericks and move the team to Las Vegas.
Right.
Which, again,
doesn't seem far-fetched.
They're very litigious, so I'll be careful about what I say in terms of what is publicly known. Let's say the Adelsons have a history of less than legal behavior. I can say that because they basically admitted they bribed Chinese officials to get their casino in Macau built, and they paid a pretty hefty fine for that. It just sort of fits the pattern of the family business when they want a casino in a certain location.
Continue to wreak havoc, yes, and roll over people like they were Wayne Huizenga with Waste Management. Speaking of Waste Management, no, I guess he did that with Blockbuster. Good old Wayne. All right, who seemed to, I don't know, did he also have an epiphany where he just became like a good guy? It's the Wayne Huizenga, or do we always harbor resentment towards this guy for the fact that every mom and pop video store just was became a human?
I know, right? Yeah, again, I'm not mad.
That's business.
That's the world of business.
Yeah. What can you do? Gonna crush you like a grape.
And then it's. I mean, it turned out okay for Wayne because he sold it at the right time, but it wasn't like it worked out in the long run for Blockbuster. You know,
No.
Netflix came along and sort of did the same thing to them that they did to all the mom and pop video stores.
One man gathers what another man spills. Grateful Dead. All right, Professor, great job all week long. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. The return of Lubie tomorrow.
Yes, the
we don't
triumphant
know-
return, assuming he can get back in the country, which
Well, I mean,
Again-
he probably is okay. But yeah, I don't know. He was nervous about Shirley's qualifications now.
is that a real thing? Was he really actually nervous about this?
I think so. I don't know. I didn't catch all of
Oh
it.
dear God.
Can you imagine? And Lubie's the type of guy, and I always told him this. I said, Lubie, act like you belong. When we're trying to penetrate these places that we have no business going into, like, you're trying to get into the Lakers locker room or something, you don't have a pass. Just act like you belong. Roll in there behind Musburger or something, as if you were his cameraman. Just go like this. But Lubie would be the first at the airport to go, I've got a gun in the bag. Like, we're through. We were on the plane. And now you're going to hold this fucking thing up? Get out of here. So, yeah, I mean, if there was going to be some kind of slip up, imagine he starts mouthing off to one of these customs people.
Sounds about right.
You're not going to hassle my wife, are you? When they had no intention of doing it. Yeah, because she was born here. This is he has a copy of the 14th Amendment. It's amazing. So be ready tomorrow. All right.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate all the comments there on the chat line. And we'll see you tomorrow as we leave you know that.
The time.
It's 9:03.
Oh, a happy day. Oh, a happy